Welcome to Project U 2.2, the podcast where life and leadership meet endurance. I'm Greg Helmer, joined by my wife and partner in life and work, Carrie. Each week, we dive deep into the mindset, the neuroscience, and the real grit it takes to stop drifting and start living with clarity, confidence, and endurance. This is about real life, real struggles, and real growth. So lace up, it's time to live with endurance. Carrie's episode this week landed in a place many of us are living right now. That tension between presence and possibility. Carrie talked about how when our minds cling to the past, we feel sadness. When they sprint into the future, we feel anxiety. But when we are fully here, now, that's where peace lives. And I've been sitting with that all week because I think the hardest moments to practice presence are the ones where we know change is coming, but we don't yet know what it looks like. Carrie shared that simple, powerful image of our dog Calvin, how he greets her with full joy every time she walks through the door. No judgment, no scorekeeping, no concern for what's next, just presence. And I have to admit, I feel that too. Every time I come home, Calvin is there, tail wagging, eyes locked in, ready to lick my cheeks like I have been gone for years. And there's something grounding about becoming welcomed like that and being fully seen in the moment. But if I'm being honest, that greeting also stirs something bittersweet in me, because there was a time when our boys did that too. When they were younger, they'd run to the door when I came home. They noticed when I left. They noticed when I arrived. And now they're older, independent, in their own worlds. Sometimes I come and go and they barely even look up. That's not wrong. It's growth, but it's also a reminder of how quickly seasons can change. And here's where the psychology comes in. Our brains are wired to notice change and loss more intensely than stability. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for threat and emotion, it flags transition as uncertainty, even when the change is good or chosen. So when seasons shift, kids growing up, careers evolving, identities loosening, the nervous system doesn't immediately say, "This is exciting." It often says, "Be careful. Something familiar is ending." That's why presence matters so much. Presence tells the nervous system, "I'm safe right now." It moves us out of the fight or flight and back into clarity. Our dog Calvin doesn't overthink because he's regulated. Kids don't spiral because they are regulated. As adults, we have to practice what used to come naturally. And that brings me to a larger transition I've been living lately. After 31 years in K-12 education, a career that shaped me, stretched me, and gave me purpose, I'm standing at the edge of transition Carrie and I have actually planned for. This wasn't impulsive. We envisioned this. We aligned our personal financial goals, professional aspirations, and our personal values more than a decade ago, back when our youngest son actually entered kindergarten. We talked about what life might look like when the boys were older, when roles shifted, when our energy moved into new spaces. And yet, even with all of that planning, I'll admit, fear still shows up. That's important to say out loud. You can plan well and still feel fear. You can be aligned and still feel a bit unsettled. You can trust the vision and still feel anxious when the path isn't fully visible. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're human. There's also an identity piece here that a lot of high-achieving leaders don't talk about. When you have spent decades being competent, needed and recognized in a role, your brain quietly links identity to usefulness. So when that role begins to loosen a bit, even by choice, the mind asks, who am I if I'm not needed in the same way? Well, that's not weakness. That's identity. Neuroscience. The brain resists ambiguity. It prefers known labels over open space, even when the open space holds more freedom. Endurance in this season isn't about charging forward. It's about staying present long enough for a new identity to emerge. Instead of panicking and grabbing onto the old one just because it's familiar. Carrie talked about exposure, how seeing a bigger world expands belief. I think presence is what allows us to actually receive that exposure without being overwhelmed by it. Presence keeps us from numbing with comfort or routine when things feel uncertain. It keeps us from shrinking back into old versions of ourselves just because they're safe. And this is where I want to gently remind and bring in the spiritual layer in a way that honors different beliefs, no matter what you call it, God, a higher power, the universe, purpose, or simply something greater than yourself. Most traditions teach that same truth. We aren't meant to see the whole path at once. We're meant to take the next faithful step. And for me, that language comes from my Christian faith. For others, it may come from a different place. But the principle is the same. Wisdom doesn't always show up as certainty. Sometimes it shows up as calm in the middle of fog. I've noticed that when I spiral into the what if mode. What if this doesn't work? What if I miss what I'm leaving? What if I don't recognize myself on the other side? It's almost always because I've left the present moment. I've jumped perhaps a bit too far ahead. Calvin never does this. Kids don't do that. They stay where their feet are. Endurance, real endurance, isn't just about pushing through. It's about staying grounded long enough to take the next right step, even when you can't see the whole path in front of you. And running has taught me that. You don't need to see all 26.2 miles to finish a marathon. You do need to see the next few steps, the next mile, the next breath, maybe the next marker. And Carrie reminded us that dreams are instructions from your future self. I believe that. And I would add this. Presence is how you hear those instructions clearly. When you are fully here, you are less reactive, less desperate, and more open to what's actually unfolding in front of you. So if you're in a season of transition, planned or unexpected, here's my invitation this week. Practice presence. Not as avoidance, but as courage. Notice who greets you when you come home. Notice what stirs emotion in you, both joy and sadness. Notice where fear is trying to rush you ahead. And gently bring yourself back to the now. You don't have to solve the whole future today. You just have to stay grounded enough to walk toward it. That's not complacency. That's endurance. That's growth. That's leveling up without losing yourself. This has been Project U 2.2, where we don't quit, we don't coast, and we don't surrender. If today helped, share it with someone who's standing in the middle of a transition and needs permission to breathe. And every Wednesday at 6:22 a.m., Carrie brings the heartbeat of this work, mindset, growth, and the next brave step. Until next time, stay strong, stay real, and keep living with endurance. See you at 6:22.